is the Rosetta Stone. It was the key to understanding Egyptian hieroglyphics, and it is one of the most precious and valuable treasures of the British Museum.
For years, the Rosetta Stone was considered merely a key to translation, a stone that allowed humans to decipher ancient Egyptian languages. But when it was recently rescanned using AI, what emerged changed the entire story. While previously considered a historical document written in just 3 languages, AI has recently discovered patterns and hidden clues that may represent more than just a translation, but a message. A message written thousands of years ago, but waiting for modern technology to decipher it. And what AI has now read, instead of explaining history, it makes it even more terrifying. So, be sure to watch this story to the end, because the real revelations are yet to come. To understand the details, subscribe to our channel, which features videos related to similar research. In 1799, while Napoleon was building forts during his Egyptian campaign, some French soldiers accompanying him were excavating near the city of Rashid, the ancient city of Rosetta. Their intention wasn't to make any historical discovery. They were simply looking for stones to strengthen a fortress wall. But during their excavation, they discovered a strange black stone. This was no ordinary stone. It was a heavy, black granodiorite slab, intricately carved. At first glance, it appeared to be just an old inscription. But when the soldiers looked closer, they realized something special was written on it. In fact, the stone contained the same message engraved in 3 different scripts: hieroglyphic at the top, demotic in the middle, and Greek at the bottom. At that time, Greek was readable, but hieroglyphic and demotic were a mystery. This is where the stone's true significance began. For the first time, historians discovered a common link that allowed them to decipher the mysterious Egyptian hieroglyphics. Using the Greek text as a basis, they hoped to decipher the other 2 scripts. What had been a chance discovery gradually became the key to understanding ancient Egypt. Before the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, the hieroglyphic script of ancient Egypt was a mystery to the world. The symbols on temple walls, the figures carved inside tombs, and the strange markings visible on ancient monuments always fascinated people. But no one could truly decipher them. From a distance, they seemed like a fairy tale, but no one knew what they really meant. Until then, most people considered hieroglyphs not a language, but a collection of mysterious symbols. They thought they were merely religious or magical symbols with no practical meaning. Some considered them decorative art, like something created by ancient artists to beautify walls. Historians had no way to read these symbols, so they were left guessing. In effect, it was the voice of an entire civilization, captured in stone, but no one was there to listen. Temple walls, kings' tombs, stories of wars, religious beliefs, everything was recorded in those symbols, yet they were silent. It was as if a book lay before them, but no one knew its language. Many scholars tried to decipher the meaning of these symbols. Some thought they were star signs, others linked them to mythology, but no concrete results were achieved. Hieroglyphics were considered a kind of mystery, beautiful, impressive, but beyond comprehension. For years, the hieroglyphic script remained like a closed door, present, but with no way to open it. Then, in 1822, a major change came. A young French scholar, Jean-François Champollion, determined to solve this riddle. He had no magical method, but he had patience and a strong clue: the same stone on which the same message was written in 3 languages. He first carefully studied the Greek text, as it was a language already understood, and then they began to match the message with the hieroglyphic script written above. This was no easy task. Every symbol, every shape, every name had to be compared again and again. Especially the names of kings, such as Ptolemy, became a major clue. When they noticed that certain symbols were repeated in the same place where the king's name appeared in Greek, a pattern began to emerge. Gradually, they realized that hieroglyphs were not just symbols. They also represented sounds. That is, these were not just pictures, but a language. That was the moment when the door opened. What followed was nothing short of miraculous. When it became possible to read the hieroglyphics, people believed the Rosetta Stone would reveal some profound secret. Perhaps some esoteric wisdom, a religious message, or a lost story. But when its true meaning was understood, everything seemed quite ordinary at first glance. In fact, the Rosetta Stone was no magical document. It was a royal decree dated 196 BC, issued during the reign of the young Egyptian ruler Ptolemy V. It praised the king, mentioned his achievements, and, most importantly, announced tax exemptions and special privileges for the priests. This was a form of political propaganda at the time. The king wanted to strengthen his image and gain the support of religious institutions. It was an administrative document, documenting matters related to governance and power. But this raises an interesting question. If it was such a simple decree, why was it written in 3 different scripts? Hieroglyphics were commonly used for religious and royal symbols. Demotic was the language of the common people and administration, and Greek was the language of the ruling class. This meant that the same message was intended to reach every class. This meant that it wasn't just a declaration, but a message that could be understood at all levels: commoners, priests, and foreign rulers. The use of 3 scripts wasn't just for convenience, but also a way to consolidate power. This gave the message permanence and legitimacy. This decree engraved on stone wouldn't fade with time. In ancient times, writing on stone wasn't just a way to convey information, but also a way to preserve it forever. Paper can burn, cloth can decay, but stone lasts for centuries. Therefore, when a ruler or religious institution engraved something on stone, it wasn't just to convey a message to the people of that time. It was also to keep it alive for generations to come. A major shift has occurred in the past few years. Understanding ancient civilizations is no longer limited to humans. Artificial intelligence, AI, has gradually become involved in this work. Whereas historians and linguists previously spent years deciphering individual symbols, machines are now able to identify patterns often overlooked by humans within a matter of hours. Take, for example, the cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia. These are thousands of years old clay tablets marked with nail-like markings. They were extremely difficult to read because many parts were broken and the language was incomplete. But AI models, trained on digital images, began to recognize patterns among these incomplete fragments. Where humans would have taken years to guess, your machines began to quickly piece together possible words and sentences. Similarly, AI was used on the Dead Sea Scrolls in Israel. Previously, some sections were believed to have been written by a single author. But the AI picked up on subtle variations in handwriting, suggesting that many different people contributed to them. Even in Mayan glyphs, long considered blurry and incomplete, the AI discovered new connections by looking at the frequency and order of symbols. But the greatest strength of AI is that it doesn't tire. It doesn't need to guess, and it isn't influenced by emotions or assumptions. It simply looks at the data. Every symbol, every distance, every repetition. It can also see how often a symbol appears, in what order, and where there are gaps. And if a part is broken or missing, it can even guess possible words based on language patterns. That is, AI doesn't just read, it tries to understand the structure. It looks at how words are connected, how symbols are repeated and where something different appears. This is where AI emerges as a new decoder. Now, the question was, when this same technique is applied to one of history's most famous inscriptions, the Rosetta Stone, will it only reveal what we already know? Or will it reveal something more? When the Rosetta Stone was rescanned using modern technology for the first time, it was attempted not just to be read, but to be understood. The high-resolution scan digitally revealed every detail of the stone, every line, every scratch, every gap, clearly visible. When this data was fed to an AI system, the initial hope was that it would confirm existing translations. But the machine began to notice something else. First, it noticed the spacing between letters and symbols. In some places, the spacing was normal, but in others, it was slightly different, as if spaces had been deliberately left. To the human eye, these were subtle differences, often overlooked as a sign of the stone's age or the craftsman's style. Then, the AI looked at the alignment of the symbols. Some hieroglyphs were slightly off from the straight line of the rest of the text. Initially, these were thought to be minor carving errors, but when the machine examined the pattern across the entire stone, it discovered that these off symbols were repeated in many places. Repetition also became a crucial indicator. Certain symbols appeared more frequently than usual, and not just in terms of meaning, but also in their position. They always appeared around specific locations. The AI also noticed that the stone carvings weren't uniform throughout. In some areas, the depth of the markings varied, and in others, the stroke style changed slightly, as if the work had been done not by the same hand, but by different methods. All these things seem small when viewed individually. But when the AI combined them, a pattern began to emerge. And most importantly, these patterns were not random. The statistical analysis revealed that these variations were likely not mere coincidence. That is, they weren't simply artisanal errors or wear on the stone. This is where thinking began to shift. What had previously been considered merely a royal decree might be more than simple text. As if there was something more hidden within the same message, a structure, an order, that was not apparent at first glance. And that means Rosetta Stone is no longer just a declaration, but possibly begins to resemble a code. When the AI began to delve deeper into the entire text of the Rosetta Stone, an interesting observation emerged. The Greek and Demotic portions were largely straightforward and clear. Their meaning was already known, a royal decree praising King Ptolemy V and granting special privileges to priests. This seemed like a typical administrative proclamation. But as the AI analyzed the hieroglyphic portion differently, the picture began to change. The hieroglyphs weren't simply translations of words. In many places, they appeared to be arranged in clusters, as if some symbols combined to form a distinct sign. Initially, these were considered decorative or religious, but the AI noticed a possible structure by looking at their order, spacing, and repetition. The machine noticed that some symbols formed clusters that didn't match normal syntax. They were arranged differently, as if some other pattern was operating behind them. It was as if a hidden signal was hidden within an open message. To illustrate this, consider a simple example. Suppose a newspaper publishes a simple news item, but hidden within its letters is a secret message that can only be deciphered by reading it in a specific way. On the surface, everything appears normal, but something else is going on underneath. AI hinted at something similar. The Greek and Demotic texts were like public announcements, straightforward, understandable, and clear. But the arrangement of symbols in the hieroglyphic portion began to resemble not just a translation of a language, but a symbolic system. This means it's possible that the message written on the stone operated on two levels. One level, intended for everyone, related to governance and administration. The second level, perhaps expressing a deeper meaning through symbols. This wasn't a final conclusion, but it was a new direction. Now the Rosetta Stone was seen not just as a key to translation, but also as a structured message. And this is where the real unraveling begins. When the AI began to read the hieroglyphic text from a different perspective, the themes that emerged were not typical of ordinary administrative language. While Greek and Demotic clearly reflected royal proclamations, certain groups of symbols seemed to suggest turmoil, and as if they were warnings rather than stories. These symbols repeatedly echoed similar sentiments: the breakdown of order, the wrath of the gods, images of fire falling from the sky, and rivers turning against humans. Interestingly, their tone didn't seem to be a description of the past, and the language seemed to hint not just at what has already happened, but also at what might happen. One line in particular stands out: "Those who awaken the voice of stone will hear what they fear." This doesn't have to be taken literally, but in a symbolic sense, it prompts one to wonder if this message is for those who will be able to read these symbols in the future. Where the stone was broken, or the text was incomplete, and the AI also suggested possible extensions based on language patterns. These reconstructions repeatedly revealed certain scenarios: the spread of disease, grain shortages, floods, and, ultimately, the downfall of human arrogance. All of this unfolded not as a prophecy, but as a recurring experience. The fear here wasn't a mysterious curse, but rather the realization that the things hinted at had occurred before in human history. Famines, epidemics, natural disasters, these are nothing new. But when such a layer of symbols is discovered in an ancient text, it's natural for people to begin to see them in a contemporary context. This interpretation doesn't mean the stone literally tells the future. Rather, it suggests that ancient writers often used symbols to convey warnings that remain relevant over time. The AI may have simply pointed out these symbols, which were previously overlooked as mere decorative or religious language. In other words, this terrifying discovery seems less like a magical message and more like a reminder of the repetitive nature of human experiences. And this is where the story becomes most poignant, because the question is no longer what the past says, but how we understand it today. When AI revealed warning signs within the Rosetta Stone, another intriguing question arose. Were such things limited to Egypt? Or were similar signs hidden in other ancient civilizations around the world? Or if we look closely, almost every ancient culture contains stories that speak of destruction, devastation, and the consequences of human arrogance. Take an ancient Egyptian tale, that of the goddess Sekhmet. It is said that when humans rebelled against the gods, the sun god Ra sent Sekhmet to punish them. She proved so destructive that rivers of blood flowed across the earth. Ultimately, she was cleverly stopped. Otherwise, mankind could have been wiped out. This may seem like just a myth, but its underlying message is clear. When the balance is disrupted, the consequences are devastating. Similarly, the Mesopotamian tale of Gilgamesh mentions a great flood that wiped out almost all of humanity. The same idea is found in the biblical story of Noah, where a divine flood wipes out the world. Greek mythology also involves the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha, a similar flood that only a few people survive. Looking further back, the Mayan civilization viewed time in cycles that carried both creation and destruction. Their calendar mentions periods where the world changes from one form to another, sometimes through natural disasters. The Hindu tradition also has the concept of yugas: Satyuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. The end of each yuga is said to mark the decline of society and a new beginning. This isn't a straightforward prophecy, but rather a hint of a pattern. That balance is disrupted and then restored over time. Now the question is, are all these stories just fiction, or do they conceal a shared experience? One idea is that these myths actually served as survival guides. Ancient societies didn't have a scientific language, but they did have experiences: floods, droughts, epidemics, wars. These experiences were preserved in the form of stories so that future generations could learn from them. That is, why myths weren't just entertainment. They were also warnings. Warnings delivered not as direct commands, but as stories, because stories are remembered. When these stories from different civilizations are put together, a common pattern emerges: disruption of balance, the wrath of nature, and the consequences of human hubris. It seems more like a shared memory than a mysterious prophecy. And perhaps this is the universal message, which has resurfaced in different forms over time. The story of the Rosetta Stone isn't just about discovery and language. It's always been a story of control. When French soldiers discovered it in 1799, it was in their possession. But a few years later, when Napoleon was defeated, the stone passed into the possession of the British and was placed in the British Museum in London. This means that control over the very thing that held the key to understanding history also became a form of power. A control over history means not just knowing the past, but also deciding what story to tell the world. When you possess important relics of a civilization, you can shape its meaning. Times have changed, but the situation isn't entirely different. Now, control over data, not the stone, is crucial. AI labs, major institutions, and governments all are working with information that can transform our understanding. When AI analysis is performed on ancient texts like the Rosetta Stone, naturally, not every result is immediately made public. There's often talk of certain findings not being shared yet, to avoid spreading misunderstanding or unnecessary fear. This doesn't prove a conspiracy, but it does show that the way we handle information is a responsibility. In ancient times, access to knowledge was limited. Only priests and scribes could read sacred texts. They decided what would and wouldn't reach the general public. To some extent, this same pattern still exists today. The only difference is that now, instead of temples, there are research institutes and palm leaves, digital files. This also has a global aspect. If an ancient source offers a clue that is considered significant in a modern context, its interpretation can have an impact that transcends borders. Therefore, institutions often proceed cautiously. Ultimately, this reminds us that knowledge isn't just information. It's also a responsibility. See, and the way we understand and share it is a power in itself. The biggest question now is, what does all this mean for us today? If we simply treat those clues as prophecies, things will go wrong. Rosetta Stone isn't a fortune teller, nor does it list future events. But when the themes revealed by AI, disease outbreaks, weather fluctuations, floods, fires, and food shortages, are juxtaposed with today's world, a striking similarity emerges. We've witnessed a global pandemic in recent years. Floods and wildfires have impacted lives in many places. Changing weather patterns are challenging both agriculture and water. Your discussions of pressure on food supplies have also become commonplace. This isn't new. Similar situations have occurred before in history. Therefore, it wouldn't be accurate to call it a prediction of the future. It might more accurately be seen as a memory, a recollection of a time when societies faced similar challenges and tried to learn from them. AI didn't create any new warnings. It simply illuminated patterns that may have existed but were previously invisible. It's as if layers of old experiences had been peeled back and brought to light. From this perspective, the Rosetta Stone seems like a mirror. It doesn't offer us a glimpse into some distant future, but rather reveals the reasons human societies have often found themselves in trouble: a breakdown in balance, the misuse of resources, and sometimes an overconfidence in their own abilities. This is not a story of mystical fear, but a simple reminder that the challenges we faced in history were often linked to human behavior. And perhaps most importantly, the message lies not in the stone, but in our behavior. Perhaps the stone isn't telling the future, but rather it's revealing what every civilization doesn't hear before its fall. If you enjoy stories like this about history and the truths behind AI, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because the next discovery might just change our thinking.